Alright. I wasn't even sure I was going to do this one tonight, so let's try to make this one quick because it's getting really fucking late. I'm here talking about. For some reason tonight, I got in my head to watch the Netflix movie, The Unforgivable. I guess I watched it because it had a really good cast, as I will get into, as I usually do. And it had an interesting premise for sure. I do not feel like that premise gets delivered on very well. But I'll get to that. So, let's just start where we start. For starters, I come to find out, looking into this, that the movie is actually based on a actually says it at the end, that it's based on the miniseries, which I've come to find out is a British television miniseries called Unforgiven. Not to be confused with the Clint Eastwood movie of the same name. I guess it's the same premise. Basically, it starts with the main character. The main character, Ruth Slater, who's played by Sandra Bullock. I'm putting up a picture of her. That look on her face is literally the look she has in the entire movie. She doesn't change her expression once. It's the weirdest fucking thing. She seems to be the most emotionless woman on earth. Now, given her situation, you can kind of understand why, but it's just like, I've never seen a movie where a character just had the same expression as if their face had no nerve endings. It's actually kind of an impressive performance on her fault on Sandra Bullock's part, because it's like, you've heard of resting bitch face. This is just resting depression face, I guess. She just always looks miserable the entire movie. Like I said, she has good reason to. The movie starts with her getting out of prison, and the story that you collect through like flashbacks and stuff as the story goes on, I'll just give it all here, but it's collected bits and pieces through flashbacks of her life. But she's in prison because 20 years ago, she served a 20-year sentence for murder. 20 years ago, she was being evicted from her home. Her and her much younger sister, who was only 5 years old at the time, were being evicted from her home. In further backstory, we get that their mother died giving birth to her sister Katie, and so basically Ruth raised Katie for the first 5 years of her life, and their father killed himself. After that, they got into financial hardships. They were losing their family home. They were going to be evicted. Ruth was afraid she would lose not only their home, but she'd lose Katie, and then she'd just completely lose her family. And so when the bank came to evict her, she wouldn't leave. It turned into a weird standoff where she had a shotgun in the house. The sheriff, played by sheriff whose name is Mac Whelan, who was played by W. Earl Brown, he tries to talk Ruth out of the house, even offering to let her and her sister stay with his family, and he tries to go into the house to talk her down. Next thing you know, gunshot rings out, the sheriff is dead, Ruth comes out with her sister in one arm and a shotgun in the other. She steals a truck, goes to a diner where police show up and she's arrested. And then that leads to the 20 years later. The first person she sees as she gets out is a guy named Vincent Cross, who's played by the actor Rob Morgan. Cross is her parole officer, and he basically, gives her the rundown of what her situation is going to be. He's a very stern guy, and he's just basically, he drives her to the home she's going to be staying at. He even asks her if she has a job set up. She says she does, doing carpentry. I guess she learned to be a carpenter in the 20 years she was in prison, so at least she has that. He tells her that, if she needs it, he can set her up with a job at a fish plant. I don't know. It's a place where they cut up and package fish. So, as weird as that sounds. At the same time this is happening, her sister, who is now in her 20s herself, is talking to her foster sister on her phone, and it gets into a car accident at the exact same time she's released. In this weird serendipitous moment. I don't know how those two things are... They kind of make it seem like those two things are supposed to be connected, but then they just... I mean, how could they be? That would have to be almost supernatural. And then the sister ends up having to, like... Because she's injured, I guess she's a pianist, and she's, like, staying... She has to stay with her parents while she recovers from her injury. But it's not even that bad of an injury. It just seems like a completely gratuitous point, and you're wondering, like, why did they even bother having this happen? It's I guess it relates to the story somehow. But anyways, sorry. Anyways, the sister is her name is Catherine Malcolm. Used to be Catherine Slater. She is played by Eileen Francoisi. I don't know how the fuck you pronounce that. Franciosi. Weird name. So there's that's going on. Her foster sister is named Emily Malcolm, and she's played by Emma Nelson. Her parents are Michael Malcolm. Or foster father is named Michael Malcolm, played by Richard Thomas, and the foster mother is Rachel Malcolm, played by Linda Edmond. So that just sets up the foster family. Ruth is, trying to get. She has a no contact order from her sister, but she is trying to get in contact with the foster family just because she wants to know that her sister is okay, and she wants to know that even though she can't technically be around her, she just wants her to know that she if her sister's old enough that if she wanted to meet Ruth, she could of her own, free will. She just wants her to know that she exists because she wrote to her for years, for all the time she was in prison, and she never got a response back, and she's wondering, is it because she doesn't want anything to do with her, or because she never got the letter? She just wants some feeling of closure because everything she did was about her sister. Her life on the outside. Now, this is where the story gets interesting because it kind of depicts her life on the outside now. That carpentry job that she had set up fell apart. She gets threatening calls at the place she's living. Somebody is clearly following her from the get-go, and she has to take the fish job that her PO set up. The guy who is following her is his name is Keith Whelan. He's played by Tom Gurry, who's an actor that if you squint real hard, you might recognize. It took me a minute to recognize him. I knew the motherfucker from somewhere, but I had to look at him a couple times because he kind of talks weird, the way his lip is held. I don't know if he's doing that on purpose or if something happened to him, but I mean, he's definitely changed. But you might remember him. He's an actor who's been around for a while, but as a kid he was in the movie The Sandlot, where he played the main character Smalls. Now he has grown up and he kind of for some reason looks like James Spader. Anyways, he's the oldest son of the sheriff who Ruth killed, and he's obviously hasn't been able to let go, and he's not angry that his father's killer is getting out of jail, which, he kind of comes off as like a sort of villainous character, but it's like, if you think about it, you can kind of understand where he's coming from. So it's hard to paint anyone as good or bad in this movie. He's not the only son of the sheriff. He has a younger brother named Steve Whelan, who's played by Will Pullen. Now, at first, it seems like Keith is the one who's going to do something awful here, and because he can't let go of the past, while Steve has very much moved on. Steve has a good job. He has a family. He has a wife and a kid. So everything seems good to him. But we'll get into that more. Meanwhile, at the fish job, Ruth has now met a friend. She meets a coworker named Blake, who seems to be very friendly towards her. You're wondering if even maybe something romantic is going to happen. Blake is played by John Bernthal. So they have a good relationship going. Then at one point, Ruth decides to visit her old family home, which is now has a family living in it. With the father of the family is John Ingram, played by Vincent D'Onofrio, and the mother is Liz Ingram, played by Viola Davis. And she comes in and pretends to just, be a carpenter who worked on the house once, and they don't necessarily trust her story. John gives her a ride back to the bus station, and he, basically calls her out saying, you've been lying this whole time. He's like, what is this about? And she explains, she tells him that, my sister and I used to live in this home. I lost custody of her, and she just asks if he knows anybody that could help her about getting custody, or not custody, just trying to find her, trying to talk to her. And he's a pro bono lawyer. He does corporate law, but he takes pro bono cases too. And so he says, he feels sympathetic, and he's like, all right, I'll look into it for you. He eventually does, but he looks into her story more and realizes who she is. Liz, his wife, asked the carpenters who were working on their home about the background, about if they knew of any children that used to live in the house, and apparently they didn't know the story that there was a murder committed on their property at one point, and Liz and John have kind of a bit of an argument about that. John is much more sympathetic towards her, even though he initially seems kind of standoffish when he found out that she was a killer. But Liz is very unsympathetic towards it. And, she's basically taking the standpoint of, that Ruth is kind of privileged in her situation, because she thinks, if it were one of her sons, they have 2 children who are half black. She's like, if it was one of them, they wouldn't even have, if they had shot a cop, they wouldn't even survive. They wouldn't have been able to spend 20 years in prison. They would have just been dead. So she just doesn't like Ruth. She's already another person who does not forgive Ruth, Ruth is, she's, that's why Ruth doesn't want to reveal, who she, her past to anybody, because she knows that instantly everybody just will not forgive her. Hence the name of the movie. And she ends up getting a second job as a carpenter at this place that's being turned into a community center for the homeless. Now, getting back to the brothers, the sons of the sheriff, the one, Keith, seemed like he's taking care of their dying mother, and he seems like he's having a hard time with everything. He's getting information from cops they still know about Ruth and about where she lives and everything. And it seems like he's very much planning to kill Ruth. And he keeps trying to get his brother to get into it. And his brother seems to be very much against it. But as time goes on, he gets on board, and he basically, he goes and he actually sees Ruth one day at her carpenter job. He starts talking to her, and she seems very nonchalant about things. And she mentions one point that her parents are dead, but she goes, but life goes on, because she's just she doesn't know who this guy is. She doesn't know what to say, and he seems very angry about that. And he sees some of her personal things. He sees that that she's trying to contact her sister, and that's where he gets an idea. And he goes to his brother, and he basically goes, "Not your shit plan." He's like, "We're gonna make her pay the way she made us pay. We're gonna take from her what she took from us," suggesting that he's planning on hurting her sister. He's planning on killing her sister to make her feel the pain that they feel, losing a family member. So the situation, and the other brother seems to be like not quite sure if he wants to go along with that. So now the situation is sort of flipped. There was also a weird comment about actually, you know what, I'll get to that. Anyways, Ruth has now become very close with Blake, and she's starting to feel normal in her life. And so at one point, while having lunch with Blake, she tells him, "Hey, I should probably let you know that I was in prison for 20 years and that I killed the sheriff and everything." And Blake just says, he can't be around her anymore. And so she just leaves, and she starts crying as she's walking away because she thought she finally found somebody who wouldn't judge her, and then they did. And it gets even worse because the next day at work, she just, as she's walking in, she just gets straight up attacked by one of her coworkers because her coworker's father was a cop. And she's making it seem that she starts saying you're sitting there bragging about killing a cop, which she wasn't bragging about it. She's not proud of what she did or anything like that. And it looks like Blake just sort of told everybody what she did, so now she's marked in this fucking place. And now she and Blake's relationship is really bad. She's pissed at Blake, rightfully so. Eventually, he does explain to her that he too is an ex-con, and that he's like, I can't be around a known felon. He goes, just talking to you is probably violating my parole. Or just us talking to each other is probably violating each other's parole. He's like, I had to talk to somebody about it, and I guess word got around. It's not like he meant for everything to happen the way it did, but what difference does it make? Meanwhile, she eventually does, through John, her lawyer, get contact with her sister's foster parents. They are also very aggressive towards her, especially the father. The mother doesn't say shit, but the father is just very hostile when she's just asking basic questions, and she comes back a bit harder, saying it's I just want her to know about me, and I just want her to, I wrote letters to her, did you fucking throw them away, did you burn them? The meeting does not go well. Fortunately for her, the Malcolm's biological daughter, Emily, overheard her parents talking about the situation. So she one day decides to go looking through their house, and in the basement she finds the letters that Ruth sent to her sister. And Emily reads them all and is touched by them, so she gets in contact with Ruth. And yeah. Okay, yeah. She gets in contact with Ruth and sets up a meeting between them. And they meet at this botanical garden. They talk a little bit. It's just kind of nice. And Emily says she should probably go, but she lets Ruth know that Katie, or Catherine, has a recital, and that if she wants to go see her, she can. It's at this day, at this time, and Ruth thanks her for it. Now, while all that was going on, you remember the Whelan boys? Well, there was a point there was this weird thing where they were having like a little celebration for one of the cops retiring where they were at, and they're, you know, Keith's wife or Steve's wife says something to him about like, you know, can we have some fun? And he makes a comment about like, you know, hey, bro, you know, big brother's having fun for you. I thought that was it, and it's just some weird. It was some weird offhand comment. You're like, what the hell is that about? Now we fast forward where Steve is tailing Ruth one day, and then his brother didn't show up. He's like, what the hell? He goes back home. He sees his kid crying, and then he opens up the door to their bedroom, and he sees that his brother is fucking his wife. And he just turns around, puts the kid back in the crib, comes back in the room, and he just beats the shit out of his brother, and then just fucking drives off in a fury. So now his life is just completely falling apart again after getting involved in his brother's fucking revenge plot and going even farther with it. This guy, who just seemed like the most normal one, like, it looked like he was repressing all of his fucking anger, and now it's all just fucking come out and gotten 10 times worse. While his brother seems to have co-opted his brother's stability and normalcy. Like, it was like literally like they switched places. So it wasn't even like the one brother discovering his resentment. It was like, or maybe it was, it's the one brother discovering his resentment, all of it coming out, but then them switching places, while the other brother seemed to overcome his resentment without even actually doing anything. This movie is just weirdly about trauma. It's about dealing with trauma, because Catherine has, you know, she has trouble sleeping. She's constantly having weird flashbacks to when she was a kid. She keeps remembering a woman, which is obviously Ruth, and she remembers some terrible situation she was involved with, but she can't remember it well. She's obviously has repressed memories. And they keep showing clips of her when she was younger. The girl they got to play her when she was young looks very much like the actress who plays her when she's older. I honestly wonder if they're related. If not, they just must have found somebody who just could be her. If you told me these two women were, if this girl was related to this woman, I'd totally believe it. They look so much alike. Anyways, Ruth tries to get in contact with her lawyers because, you know, she has a chance to see her sister, and she wants to know, like, to what degree is she, like, if she goes to the recital, will she get arrested? Because she still has that technically no contact order. It's like, so what does she have to do? So she can't, apparently John is out of town, so she tries to go to his house to see if he's there. He's not, so she has to speak to the mother to see if maybe, like, she can get in contact with John. Liz tells her children to go back in the house, and she and Ruth get into it, and she just starts like fucking yelling at her, saying that like you're just some privileged bitch, and you know, you will say anything to get your way. It's like you lost your privileges to your sister and everything. It's just more punishment on top of punishment for, you know, the thing that she's already supposedly been punished for. Now, here's where I get to a spoiler alert. Okay? You've been duly warned. This movie was all about like the trauma of a violent crime and how it affects so many people, not just the person that it was committed on or the person who committed it, but just like everybody around them. You know, there's victims everywhere. And how victims can become victimizers and things of that nature. But it's also a movie about about punishment and about justice and what those things actually mean. Because Ruth served 20 years in prison for her murder, and then the justice system told her after 20 years, okay, well, technically she's on parole, but it's like, you served your time, you can go now. And everywhere she goes, no one is willing to give her another chance. You know, her PO tells her, like, it's like, you can't start 20 years in the past. That's over now. You have to start life now. But it's just like, well, how is she supposed to start life now when no one will let her let go of the past? She's like, how is she supposed to move on from the past if no one in the world will? She has trouble getting a job because of who she is or what she did. She has trouble making friends, forming any sort of connections. How are you supposed to start a life when no one else will let go of this? It's not necessarily about forgiving or even really forgetting. It's just about accepting. And it's like, we say this is the punishment and then it meets the crime. Well, is it? Because apparently we don't all agree on that. And nobody is letting it go. And this was an interesting thing to explore. It's like, how much do you punish somebody? It's like, should we just kill somebody who kills another person? Like, what? Are we just going to throw them away like they're garbage? But a person still exists. Like, this person still exists. Even if they did something unforgivable, they're still there. So what do we do with them? Do we just make a person a ghost? That just seems so cruel, no matter what somebody did. But maybe I'm being naive. But it raises an interesting discussion. Here's where the spoiler alert comes in. She didn't do it. Despite telling everybody she did it, she didn't do it. Because in an argument with Liz, she just starts screaming about how how her sister was 5 years old. And then we go back to another flashback while she was arguing with the sheriff on the line, saying that if anybody tries to come, she said, if anybody tries to come in the house, I swear to God, I'll fucking shoot them. She just was posturing. The gun was over near the wall while her sister was leaning against the wall. And her sister hears somebody trying to come in the back. She grabs the shotgun. How this little 5-year-old just grabbed and held a shotgun is beyond me. But she fires it and kills the sheriff. And the shotgun blast knocked her out. And she just must have... And she just, I guess, instantly, or just never realized, because the blast knocked her out, she never saw that she killed somebody. So even she doesn't fully aware. And now with her blocking it out, she must just never been fully aware. Because later that day, they're just in the diner eating, and the sister seems to be fine. So she must have not fully realized what it is she did. And she didn't want her sister to be punished. Plus, Ruth just blamed herself, because she did set up the situation that led to it. She says, it's my fault. It was my fault. But instantly, when Liz finds that out, instantly, she's just like, all is forgiven. She's willing to help Ruth. She drives her to the fucking recital. And as she's about to go into the recital, that's when she gets the call from Steve. But the thing is, Steve followed Ruth to the botanical garden where she met Emily Malcolm, her Catherine's foster sister. So Steve thought that Emily was Ruth's sister, so he kidnapped her. And he tells her that, he's like, I have your sister, you're gonna come. So she drives to this place. She has Liz drive her to this place. She's like, yeah, I know where she is. You just, leave. If you just drop me off there, everything will be fine. And Liz asks what's going on, and she's just like, she goes, yeah, somebody has Catherine. I have to go get her. And, of course, Liz calls the cops, and Ruth goes in, sees right away that it's Emily, and realizes, like, he's got the wrong person, and now she's involved in a hostage situation. And she basically manages to talk Steve down by telling him about his father, and he doesn't do anything, and she unties Emily and lets her go. And then when she comes out, the cops, cuff her, and they cuff Steve too, and they take them both in. Vincent shows up to take Ruth away. He's like, listen, unless you're going to charge her with something. He's like, I'm a parole officer, so I'm taking her. Then you see at the end, you see Emily's family is with her, including Catherine, who sees Ruth, and she just comes up and gives Ruth a hug, and that's how the movie ends. Which is just like, does she know who Ruth is, or is she just hugging the girl who saved her sister's life? It's like, does she know the situation? Does she remember Ruth? Also, it's like, it's that whole situation was still kind of Ruth's fault, because if she hadn't gotten contact with the Malcolms, like, that never would have happened. And Emily would have never gone looking into it more. She never would have met with Ruth. She never would have caught the attention of Steve. So it was kind of Ruth's mess again. But, you know, she got everyone out of it without anybody dying this time, so that's good. But here's what I have to say about that reveal. I think in that moment, you completely abandoned the most interesting part of this movie, because it's kind of a dull movie. It's as dull as the look on Sandra Bullock's face the entire fucking movie, just dead. It's the question of, like, how much do we make somebody pay? Because even after they're out of prison, it's hard for them to get a job, hard for them to hold any social standing. It's like, what do we do with somebody who commits a crime like this? It really makes you wonder, like, why don't we just execute them? It's just like, we're never going to forget them. We're never going to forgive them. We're never going to forget what they did. We're never going to let it go. We're never going to move beyond this. I didn't like how it was just, it just took Liz finding out, like, it wasn't only until she found out that she didn't really do it, that it's just like, oh, this is a human being that deserves sympathy. You know, at least John was just willing to give it to her, and she's like, oh, because Liz makes mention, because you're a bleeding heart lawyer. It's just like, well, you know, what do you want to do? But then again, like, maybe I'm being naive, because how do you forgive somebody, and how do you forget what a person's done when somebody's done something that horrible? You know? Like, it raised an interesting point and then tossed that point away. That's how I feel about it. I feel like it was an easy out. Almost like a Deus Ex Machina, if you know that term. Basically, that's a literary term of when a writer has written themselves into the corner, so then all of a sudden just makes up something fantastical that saves the situation. Like, you know, if you had written that your character was in a burning building, and instead of writing out an intelligent way that they got out of the building, you just made it like Jesus appeared and, like, teleported them away, that would be a Deus Ex Machina. It's just like an easy out of a situation, and that's what I felt like that was. Even though that makes more sense than Jesus fixing the problem, it still is like, it just felt too neat, you know? Too neat of a situation. And it bothered me. It really fucking bothered me. Because I felt like it ruined the movie. Not that it was that great of a movie, but that was the most interesting thing it had going for it, and it tossed it away. Just for some melodrama crap. But yeah. I give the Unforgivable, I give it a thumb down. It was a disappointing movie. Alright. That's it for me. Once again, I'm done. Wow, that went on for a while. Have a good night.